Hello, today I'm going to be revisiting a favorite topic of mine, which is the hero's journey. In previous videos, I've broken down the hero's journey, explaining every step and comparing and contrasting the versions by Joseph Campbell in his book The Hero with a Thousand Faces and Christopher Vogler in his book The Writer's Journey. The concept of the hero's journey originated from Campbell's study of mythology, but it's also applicable to a wide variety of modern-day stories. For example, you might be aware that the first Star Wars movie follows the hero's journey framework very, very closely. Other examples of modern stories that follow the hero's journey include The Hunger Games and The Wizard of Oz. And I also made a video a while back about the first episode of the Star Trek show Strange New Worlds and how I thought that fit the hero's journey. Today I'm going to be taking another example from a TV show that I used to watch and breaking down how the story follows the hero's journey over the course of the first season. And that show is Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time is a TV show that aired on ABC in the 20-teens and follows fairy tale characters living in the real world in the present day. They've been put under a curse so that, with a couple of exceptions, they have no idea who they are. And the protagonist is a woman named Emma Swan, who, despite growing up in the real world, is the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming and is destined to be the one to break the curse and save them. Once Upon a Time ran for 7 seasons, so as you can imagine, it followed many different story arcs, some of which followed the hero's journey more closely than others. Season 1 follows the hero's journey very closely, though, and I think that it's a great example of how the hero's journey works in a modern storytelling medium. So without further ado, I'm going to go through the character archetypes defined in Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey, as well as the stages of the hero's journey. I'm using Christopher Vogler's version as opposed to Joseph Campbell's because, while they're very similar, I feel like Vogler's version, the Writer's Journey version, is a little bit more accessible and a little bit more applicable to modern media, whereas Campbell's version, you kind of have to explain what all of the names of the stages mean before you even get into breaking down how they fit, and it was designed more based on old myths and legends as opposed to modern movies, books, or TV shows. In The Writer's Journey, Christopher Vogler describes 8 character archetypes that are very common in hero's journey stories, and I think that all of these are represented to some extent in Once Upon a Time Season 1. Emma obviously plays the role of the hero. Not only do the flashbacks tell us that she has some kind of great destiny as the magically appointed savior who's going to break the curse, but her whole story follows this journey very closely. She's living in the ordinary world, something comes and pulls her out of it onto this grand adventure. She kind of refuses the call at first, but eventually accepts it. She fits the hero archetype not just because she's the protagonist of the story, but because she's the one who's on the journey. The role of the herald is played by her son Henry, who she gave up for adoption when he was a baby, but who shows up on her doorstep at her apartment in Boston to deliver the call to adventure. "Are you Emma Swan? My name's Henry, I'm your son." And then he goes on to tell her that he lives in a town that's full of fairy tale characters under a curse, and that she's the only one who can break that curse. Now, obviously she doesn't believe it at first, but she eventually will, and she eventually will fulfill that destiny and do what he's asking her to do. It's just going to take a while to get there. Herald characters often play another role in the story as well, and Henry plays many different roles over the course of the 7 seasons, even becoming the hero character in the final one. However, in Season 1, he plays the role of the trickster really well. The trickster is a character who's kind of unpredictable, who may be seen as odd by the other characters, and who's an agent for change. Henry absolutely is. He thinks that the town is full of cursed fairy tale characters. That definitely makes him a little bit odd, but since he's right, it also means that he's seeing things a lot more clearly. His actions are totally unpredictable. He does things that the characters really don't expect him to do, like, for instance, stealing a credit card and showing up on Emma's doorstep to deliver the call to adventure, or towards the end of the season, his decision to eat the poisoned apple turnover. Unlike the ally characters, who are there to support the protagonist, he's there to push her into doing what she needs to do. Speaking of allies, Emma finds a lot of those throughout the first season as well. There's Mary Margaret Blanchard and David Nolan, who are really Snow White and Prince Charming. Graham, who's actually the huntsman from Snow White, Ruby, who's Little Red Riding Hood, Dr. Hopper, who's actually Jiminy Cricket. She ends up with a lot of people on her side, and as the plot thickens, things become very complicated, but there's pretty much always someone who she can count on. 2 of those characters, I think, could also be classified as the mentor, in that While Emma doesn't really have a traditional mentor like a Gandalf, Merlin, Dumbledore type, she does have people who are there to kind of point her in the right direction. One of those characters is Dr. Hopper, who, as you know, actually Jiminy Cricket, is the conscience whispering in your ear. And the other one is Mary Margaret, who's actually Snow White and is Emma's mother. And even though they don't know that they're mother and daughter, and because of magical stuff, they're the same age, Mary Margaret is in many ways a little bit more mature than Emma and is sometimes able to point out where she's going wrong or things that she might want to consider that she hasn't. As many trustworthy allies as Emma finds, though, she also finds people who may not be so trustworthy. Rumpelstiltskin, or Mr. Gold, is a really good example of the shapeshifter archetype. Sometimes he's working with Emma and trying to help her out. Sometimes he's working with Regina, who is Emma's enemy and the one who cast the curse. Sometimes he's doing his own thing and manipulating them both in ways that they don't understand. The whole time he has his own agenda. Sometimes accepting his help leads to a positive outcome, and sometimes it doesn't. And then that takes us to the Threshold Guardian and Shadow archetypes, which I think are actually the same person. Regina is the biggest obstacle that Emma encounters when she first arrives in Storybrooke. She's hostile towards her almost from the beginning. She doesn't want her there. When Emma decides to stay in Storybrooke, even when she only plans to stay for a week, it's in defiance of Regina. So I think that she definitely qualifies as the Threshold Guardian. The town line is another Threshold Guardian. Once you cross it, you're kind of stuck there. And so crossing into Storybrooke, even though Emma doesn't really realize it in the moment, definitely is also a crossing the threshold moment, and we'll get to that in a bit. But as far as Threshold Guardians who Emma has to defy even just to start the journey, Regina definitely qualifies. However, from the flashbacks, we're also told from episode 1 that she's the evil queen from Snow White, and that she's the one who cast the curse. So obviously she's going to be more than just the Threshold Guardian, and just deciding to stay in Storybrooke won't be the only time that Emma has to deal with her. And while there are definitely other antagonists, the entire season really revolves around the conflict between Emma and Regina in their battle for custody over Henry, and ultimately in things relating to magic and the Dark Curse and everything. So with the character archetypes out of the way, let's talk about the stages of the hero's journey. The hero's journey begins in the ordinary world, which for Emma in Once Upon a Time Season 1 is Boston, Massachusetts. We get to see a little bit of her life there, and enough to know that it's kind of lonely and not particularly pleasant. She has, a job and an apartment and everything, but she's really not happy. When Henry shows up on her doorstep and is like, "Hi, my name's Henry, I'm your son, I need you to come to Storybrooke with me," that's definitely the call to adventure. And Emma initially refuses. She's like, "I'm gonna call the cops because, there's a runaway child showing up on my doorstep." And then she's like, "Okay, I'll take you back home, but I'm not staying. I'm not your mom. I'm not the savior to break some curse. I'm just dropping you off." And then even once she decides to stay, she spends the entire first season up until the final episode refusing to believe in his magic curse theory. So I would say that the refusal of the call is a very, very big part of the story. The next stage is called the meeting with the mentor, and I would probably put this at the point where Emma meets Mary Margaret Blanchard. I said earlier that Mary Margaret and Dr. Hopper are not really clear-cut mentors in the Gandalf type, but they still do sort of serve that purpose, and Emma's first meetings with Mary Margaret are what basically helps her to figure out that she needs to stay. Her conversations with her at the school when they're looking for Henry when he's run away again, and then Mary Margaret's eventual offer to let Emma stay with her if she wants to stay in Storybrooke. The two of them become roommates, which is good because there are no vacancies for apartments in Storybrooke. It's been frozen in time for a long time, so obviously nobody ever moves. So through her initial meetings with Mary Margaret, Emma is able to get kind of a sense of direction and purpose and the means to do what she's then deciding to do. The crossing of the first threshold is actually something that happens in an odd way in that the characters involved, or at least Emma herself, doesn't really seem to understand the significance of it. When they drive past the Welcome to Storybrooke sign and cross the town line, they're not going to be able to go back. She's not going to be able to just go back to her life in Boston. Or at least, I think that that's strongly implied. Definitely nobody from Storybrooke can leave, and things happen at the town line to prevent them from doing that. Henry implies later that Emma could because she's not really under the curse. But can she really? Bad things happen when she tries to leave town as well, so it's not really clear. Regardless, though, the moment that she drives her car into Storybrooke, there's no going back. She's going to be there until she's done what she needs to do. Most of season 1 is made up of the tests, enemies, and allies stage, in which the main character overcomes many obstacles, makes friends and enemies, and basically gets closer and closer to achieving what they need to, but still has something big to overcome. In Emma's case, that's her lack of belief. She doesn't believe in magic. She doesn't believe that Storybrooke is under a curse. Even when there's enough evidence that maybe it seems like Henry's theory is not totally nonsense, and of course as the viewer, you see the fairy tale flashbacks alongside of it, so you know that that's the case. But it's not until Regina gives Emma a poisoned apple turnover that Henry takes a bite out of and then immediately falls unconscious that Emma actually starts to believe that maybe there's something to this whole fairy tale curse thing after all. In the final episode, Emma confronts Regina, who admits to everything. She actually does care about Henry and doesn't want him to be, poisoned or put under a sleeping curse or whatever this apple is going to do in the real world. So she and Emma agreed to work together to save him, along with Mr. Gold, who's actually Rumpelstiltskin. And it all leads up to Emma descending in an elevator down into a hidden underground cavern beneath the library. That is the approach the inmost cave stage, kind of literally. In this underground cavern, there's a dragon. It's actually Maleficent in dragon form from the Disney Sleeping Beauty movie, and she has this potion that's hidden inside of her that's made of true love, and so the theory is that if Henry is given this potion, he'll wake up because true love can break any curse. So in the ordeal stage, Emma fights the dragon, throws her sword at it, just like Prince Philip in the Sleeping Beauty movie. The dragon explodes into dust, and Emma is left with the potion. That's the reward stage. She gets what she came down there for. She gets the potion that might save Henry. However, we're not done yet, because the next stage is the road back, and the road back gets complicated. At this point, Emma is double-crossed by Mr. Gold, who takes the potion, and then she and Regina both get phone calls from the hospital saying that, unfortunately, Henry has passed away. They go back to the hospital, and that does seem to be the case. However, at that point, Emma kisses Henry on the forehead, and he wakes up. That's the resurrection stage, literally. Even though the initial plan with the potion failed, Emma was still able to save Henry because true love can break any curse, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be romantic true love. It can also be the love of a parent for a child, for instance. But it's not just the poisoned apple curse that she breaks. It's actually the curse on the town as well. When she kisses Henry on the forehead, not only does he wake up, but this pulse of magic goes out through the entire town. All around town, people's memories start to come back, and that's what I would label as the return with the elixir moment. Not only does she do what she set out to do in this particular instance to save Henry, but she now also achieves the goal that Henry himself, acting as the herald archetype, pointed out in episode 1. She breaks the curse and saves the people of Storybrooke, giving them back their memories of who they really are. So those are my thoughts on how season 1 of Once Upon a Time fits the hero's journey. If you liked this and you'd like to see more from me, be sure to subscribe. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday.